Make sure the stream is coming up. And I'll start by chanting. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Namaste, everyone. Let me just check here, make sure this is working. Looks like it's working. Yeah. Okay. Good. Welcome to you all. I'll mention that it's a snowy day here in New Jersey, so our local students are not here. I've asked them not to come because of the snow, but hopefully some of them are watching online along with all of you, and we'll have a nice satsang here today. As always, we have some really great questions, so let me just double check this, and then we'll begin. First question comes from Maya, who lives in Singapore. Maya asks, how do we pray so that we get guidance from God in all situations? It's a good question about prayer and about the purpose of prayer. To pray for guidance, what does it mean to pray for God's guidance? Does it mean to pray that God will speak to us and tell us what to do? And of course, that's a very, in my opinion, that's a very childish kind of prayer. What would be a more mature way of praying to God for guidance? And it would be to pray for the clear mind and discernment about what is dharma, what is the right thing to do. Guidance means about following the path of dharma, and the reality is that it's not easy to always determine what is truly the path of dharma. So sometimes we need help. Sometimes we can ask for advice from close friends, or ask advice of a spiritual leader, or you can pray for guidance to Ishvara, to God, but again, not by asking Ishvara to tell you in words what you should do, but rather to pray for the proper discernment of what is the path of dharma. The tricky part, of course, is excuse me, many times our minds get clouded by our emotions, and emotions often lead us to make wrong decisions and to go down wrong paths. Not always, but they can. So one important purpose of praying to Ishvara for guidance is it helps settle your mind. Only after you've settled your mind can you really exercise your judgment most effectively. I think there was a video I made long ago on this topic, and it had a cute title. The title was, "Don't just do something, sit there." This is a reference to an American saying, don't just sit there, do something. And the purpose of that video, don't just do something, sit there, means to have a few quiet moments, sit quietly for a few moments to discern what is the best thing to do before you leap into action, so to speak. You can look for that video. It's kind of a cute topic. Next question from Arju. Arju lives in Seattle, Washington. He asks, how to understand why do we need to be in Jagrat Avastha, waking state? Why do we need to be awake to achieve samadhi? And he asks this question because Turiya, which is pure consciousness, is the consciousness because of which the states of waking, dream, and sleep exist. Since Turiya is beyond the three states, there's some confusion here. Turiya means fourth. And many people I don't think Arju has made this confusion, but many people do. They say that they wrongly think that in addition to the three states, waking state, Jagrat Avastha, dream state, Swapna Avastha, and deep sleep state, Sushupti Avastha, many people wrongly think there's a fourth state because the Mandukya Upanishad and other scriptures make a reference to a fourth. But if you've attended my classes on Mandukya Upanishad and other classes, we make it very clear that it's not fourth in addition to the three, it's a fourth because of which the three exist. The fourth is the underlying consciousness, the consciousness that's present while you're awake, the consciousness that's present when you're dreaming, and the consciousness that remains completely present even in deep sleep. One unchanging consciousness. So going to Arju's question, why do we have to be in Jagrat Avastha to achieve samadhi? Samadhi is a state of absorption. What is it that gets absorbed? In meditation, what is it that achieves a state of absorption? And most of you can correctly answer, mind. It's your mind that is prepared by previous training in meditation, and eventually it's your mind that achieves samadhi, which is a state of the mind, state of experience. So if you're not awake, how can you achieve samadhi? Samadhi is a condition of your mind. If you're not awake, you're not in samadhi. You might be asleep. Anyway, that's a bad joke. So, let us not confuse. Samadhi is a condition of the mind. It's a condition of the mind that's achieved in the waking state through the practice of meditation. And all of that has nothing to do with turiya, the underlying consciousness because of which the waking state exists, dream state exists, deep sleep state exists, the consciousness because of which you're able to have samadhi. So these are at two different levels. The three states of experience and samadhi are at the level of mind. Turiya, the fourth, that is pure consciousness, and it's at a deeper level. When I say deeper level, where is my pot? Here. It's like, instead of talking about the size and shape of the pot, we can talk about clay. So instead of talking about three states of experience and samadhi, we can talk about consciousness, which is called turiya, the fourth. All right. Next question. Good questions. Next question from Om Prakash. I think he lives in Texas. He says, interesting question about karma yoga. He says, every morning I contemplate the saying, I don't do any karma, any action. I am a karta, not an agent of action. I have no body and mind. I am Satchidananda Atma. Everything is done by Ishvara and by this body and mind, not by me. Now, what he's referring to is he is calling to mind certain teachings of Advaita Vedanta, certain teachings that I believe are understood in a conceptual way. We understand that Vedanta says that you are not your body and mind. Vedanta says that you are not the agent of action. Vedanta says that you are not Satchidananda Atma. But at first, these are understood as concepts, as an as ideas. They're not truths about yourself that you have personally discovered. Eventually, Om Prakash, and I think most of you, will discover that indeed, I am not this body and mind. I am pure consciousness, but that needs to be discovered personally through a process of introspection. We call it Atma Vichara, self-inquiry. Merely understanding the words of Vedanta it's a starting point. They're meant to lead you to this personal discovery. So, Om Prakash begins by saying that he recalls his Vedantic teachings, which I presume he has not yet personally discovered. And I presume that because he's practicing karma yoga. Karma yoga is a spiritual practices which are done by those who are not yet enlightened. Okay, so he says, throughout the day, I forget all of that, and while I'm engaged in worldly activities. How can I do karma yoga throughout the day so that I never forget all of this? I'm confused about how karma yoga is to be practiced. Karma yoga is not based on these Vedantic teachings. You are not your body and mind. You are Satchidananda Atma. That's the pure teachings of Advaita Vedanta. That's not karma yoga. If you look into the Bhagavad Gita, where Sri Krishna teaches about karma yoga, he teaches about the nature of Atma being Satchidananda in some places, but when he's teaching about karma yoga, he's not teaching about Satchidananda Atma. These are different topics that come in the Bhagavad Gita and throughout the teachings of Vedanta. So let's understand it very simply. Karma yoga means to recognize Ishvara's role in everything you do throughout the day. To recognize, many of you remember my definition of karma yoga, is to turn your daily activities into a form of prayer. So that right now my activity is teaching. So for me to recognize that the fact that I have this opportunity to teach is a gift of Ishvara. The fact that I have a body that's still alive, gift of Ishvara. I have a mind that's working fairly well, gift of Ishvara. And I can be grateful to Ishvara for these gifts. Whatever I understand, and I'm teaching you, all of that is a gift of Ishvara. I'm just giving an example of how karma yoga is to turn your ordinary activities into a prayerful activity by seeing Ishvara's role in your life. So seeing Ishvara's role in your life is different than seeing the teachings of Vedanta. I'm not my body and mind. I'm not an agent of action. I am Satchidananda Atma. Those are important teachings, but they're not the teachings associated with karma yoga. Karma yoga is focused on Ishvara, not focused on Atma. The main teachings of Advaita Vedanta are focused on your true self, Atma Swarupa, your essential nature. But the teachings of karma yoga are focused on Ishvara. As I said, to turn your activities into prayer, to recall Ishvara's role in your life. So I hope that answers that question. Next question from Krishna. Krishna lives in Boston. He said, in a prior class, I described the moment when you described when you discovered the truth. You said initially it was glimpses before it became permanent. Krishna goes on to ask, if it's comfortable for you to share, can you elaborate on what you mean by glimpses? What was the moment and practice by which you saw through the illusion of a separate doer? I ask this because many seekers, while intellectually understanding the teachings and they try to assimilate it, the moment does not seem to arrive. How does one persevere without feeling defeated. Okay. Yeah. Krishna there are two issues here. One is, what are these glimpses? And second, what happens when you don't get those glimpses? So first issue, what do I mean by a glimpse? It means at some point, the teachings become deeply personal. At the beginning, it's always intellectual, it's always conceptual. You understand, Vedanta says you are Satchidananda Atma, you are pure consciousness. But at some point, when you're engaged in self-inquiry, and he asks, when does it take place? These glimpses take place during Atma Vichara, self-inquiry. When does Atma Vichara happen? That can be at various times. Very often Atma Vichara takes place during a class, but not necessarily during a class. You can do Atma Vichara during meditation, of course. You can do Atma Vichara while you're washing the dishes. So it's unrelated to the activity. Atma Vichara is a process of self-inquiry. Who am I, really? Looking within yourself in your own experience. And when you really get it, in that process of self-inquiry, you personally confirm that, yes, indeed, my essential nature is unborn, uncreated, unchanging consciousness. At some point, you get it. That's what I called a glimpse. And glimpse because the glimpse goes away, and then you get another glimpse and another glimpse and another glimpse, and pretty soon it doesn't come and go. It becomes abiding knowledge. So that's what I mean by glimpse. Now, the second part is what happens when those glimpses don't come. He asks how to persevere. What we're pursuing, you know this already, what we're pursuing through the teachings of Advaita Vedanta is something remarkable. And the fact that you don't get it right away is hardly surprising. It takes time, it takes dedication, and it takes, we need, you've heard me use the expression, we need all the help we can get. So it's helpful to support your practice with prayer, with meditation, with karma yoga. When your practice is properly supported, and when you have access to proper teachings, like we do here, and when you are engaged in this self-inquiry. Let me just give an example. Is it true that the consciousness by which I know what's happening right now, is it true that that very consciousness is unborn, uncreated, vast, limitless, and at some point you get it? Yes, that is in fact true. There's no impediment to gaining that recognition. There's no impediment that you can't overcome. It's just a matter of, he says, to persevere. It does take perseverance, and not just perseverance. Perseverance accompanied by proper spiritual practice. If you're engaged in sadhana and you persevere, my feeling is you will, if you haven't already gotten those glimpses, and I think many of you have, if you haven't already gotten those glimpses, they will come. You will get it. All right. Next question from Neil. Neil lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. He says, Neil says, I work in a corporate environment where I sometimes feel like I'm working in the Kaurava camp, making reference to the Mahabharata. Kauravas were the so-called bad guys. So this is quite long. Let me paraphrase it, and I read it before. So Neil is working in a corporate environment where he feels his values are compromised. He wants to live a life of dharma, but in a corporate environment, there are plenty of reasons leading you to bend the rules, so to speak, and to kind of do things which are adharmic because they're kind of required in that corporate environment. He says, I have two choices. I can stay in my job and continue to be this is nice. He says, I can either stay in my job and continue to be countercultural by bringing light into my workplace. I like that word, countercultural. Or I can leave my job and seek greener pastures where I can do something more conducive to following dharma. I fear that by multi-year contract. Okay. And he's asking for guidance. What should you do? Should you persist in that corporate environment, coping with the challenges to follow dharma when there's a lot of push, as it were, to not follow dharma? And he said very nicely, he can be a countercultural example. I like that expression. Or would it be better for him to abandon that work environment and find a more suitable kind of job? I understand that following one's swadharma is in an ethically fraught situation is challenging. Any guidance you may have is greatly appreciated. Neil has expressed, I think, very nicely here a challenge that many of you may experience in life, being pulled in different directions. And if you ask me for guidance, I can give you guidance, but I can't tell you which to do. I can't say you should stay in your job, or I can't say that you should leave your job. I can't give you that particular guidance because I don't know the situation as well as you do. No one knows the situation better than you. So therefore, no one is in a better position to make the decision than you. You have to make the decision. Where a Swami's guidance can come in is that I can remind you what is the basis for making your decision, and I can assist you. We can talk briefly here about how to go through that decision-making process. First and foremost, and Neil understands this very well, is following dharma. But we need to take a bigger picture of following dharma, because following dharma in the short run and following dharma in the long run could be very different things. An example is if somebody has cancer and they're required to have surgery or chemotherapy or radiation therapy, all of those therapies do damage to the body. To damage your body is a dharma. But in the long run, of course, it's dharma. We understand how those therapies work. The point I'm making is that in order to make a good decision, you can't look only about what's happening in your day-to-day life. You need to take a bigger view of your life and your family, your profession, everything that's happening in your life. So it might be very helpful to reframe your question and see it from a larger point of view, meaning a span of time. One practical bit of advice is to imagine yourself 5 years in the future. This applies, by the way, to a lot of decision making. If you can choose path A or path B, one good way of evaluating those is imagine yourself having chosen path A, where would you be in 5 years? Or having chosen path B, where will you be in 5 years? Just a simple method of helping to discern more clearly, and especially a method that helps you get the bigger point of view. Okay. Next question from Prashanto, who lives in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Interesting question. He says, it seems to me that ego is playing a trick on us by setting enlightenment as a future achievement, like a business goal or a career path. Well said. On the path of spirituality, it often rewards itself for progress. Ego often rewards itself for progress, punishes itself for failure, putting us on yet another ceaseless rat race. The more we try to achieve something through external means, the further we are away from our true self. Can you answer this puzzle for me? Well said. Absolutely, we can turn spiritual growth into another kind of process. We can not. Let me rephrase it. We can turn enlightenment into another goal that we're trying to achieve. So in addition to, you want a family, you want a career, you want some money, you want to go on holidays, you want to go to nice restaurants. There are so many things. People have a bucket list and all these things that you want to accomplish in your lifetime. And one of those items on the list is enlightenment. If enlightenment is merely one item on your bucket list, that's not enlightenment. You haven't properly understood what Advaita Vedanta is all about. Advaita Vedanta presents enlightenment as the ultimate goal. Moksha is a more formal term for it, liberation. But enlightenment is a helpful term. From the standpoint of Advaita Vedanta, moksha is not one of many goals that you achieve in life. It's not that kind of goal at all. It's a fundamental goal. It's an entirely different goal. And let me try to explain it in some general terms. What is it that makes all of those items on your bucket list? Why are they there? Why do you want a family? Why do you want a career? Why do you want money? Why are all these worldly goals desirable? Well, Vedantic analysis is very simple. All these worldly goals are for the sake of inner contentment and perfect peace. You want to be content, happy. The Vedantic analysis goes on to say that the true source of that contentment and peace that you find through worldly activities, the true source is within. So Advaita Vedanta redirects your pursuit so that you ultimately realize that all of your pursuits in life are done for the sake of contentment, but the direct way to pursue that contentment is spiritual practice, is through the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. What I'm trying to show is that it is a goal, but it's a goal completely unlike worldly goals. Worldly goals are many. This goal is one. If you achieve other worldly goals, you still won't be satisfied. So you have your bucket list, you keep ticking off items on your bucket list, but you tick off 1, 2, 3, there's still a bunch more. And by the time you tick all of them off, you're already adding new ones onto your list. There is no end to worldly accomplishments. But the goal of Advaita Vedanta, enlightenment, is utterly different because I'll stay with the metaphor, if you tick off that goal of gaining enlightenment, the bucket list dissolves. It's gone. There's nothing more to be pursued in life. I hope that conveys an answer to what looks very confusing. All right, next question comes from Patrick. It's quite long. Patrick lives in Winchester, Kentucky, and it's really quite long. So let me paraphrase it. When you send questions, it's helpful if you try to make them brief. As I understand, and I read this before, Patrick has been following these teachings of Advaita Vedanta, following the teachings of Puja Swami Dayananda, my guru, and others. And now he is experimenting with teachings from other Hindu traditions, specifically Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But he finds problems because when you look at other spiritual traditions like Gaudiya Vaishnavism, you find that they don't fit with Advaita Vedanta. So this creates a dilemma for Patrick, how to reconcile the pursuit of other spiritual traditions with the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. Well, to address Patrick's question, I would ask, why are you interested in Gaudiya Vaishnavism? And I'm quite sure the answer to it is that Patrick wants to cultivate bhakti. Wonderful. Excellent. And the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition is an extraordinarily focused tradition on developing Krishna bhakti. It's wonderful, very specifically focused on developing Krishna bhakti. So suppose we separate out two issues. Is it Gaudiya Vaishnavism that you want, or is it bhakti that you want? Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a package. It's a means to the end. The contents of the package, the goal is bhakti. So my suggestion to Patrick or any of you is, if you want to cultivate bhakti, you need not go outside to this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition or any other spiritual tradition for the sake of cultivating bhakti. There's plenty and plenty of teachings within the context of Advaita Vedanta that can help you cultivate bhakti and do so without creating this conflict between different traditions. Patrick makes reference to the fact that some teachers in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition are highly critical of Shankaracharya and the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. That becomes very difficult to reconcile. So what I would suggest is pursue absolutely bhakti is worthy of your pursuit, addressing Patrick and all of you. But you want to cultivate it, but how? And what I would suggest is going to a different spiritual tradition for the sake of cultivating bhakti creates lots of complexity. You can look within the tradition of Advaita Vedanta and find plenty of support. He made reference to my guru. My own guru has plenty of teachings. On my YouTube channel, you find many videos which support the practice of bhakti. So it's a way, if you cultivate bhakti within the context of Advaita Vedanta, you won't be challenged by these conflicts. All right. Next question from Amit. Amit lives in India. He has a question about suffering and how the goal, and again I'll paraphrase, the goal of Advaita Vedanta is really to put an end to suffering. And no doubt, a lot of the suffering due to emotional problems, sufferings related to fear of death or physical illness can be removed through the teachings of Vedanta, not through the teachings of Vedanta, through spiritual growth culminating in enlightenment. Let me make that clear. Emotional issues arising due to anger, hate, jealousy will subside since we understand everyone is the same consciousness and we are that eternal consciousness. Okay. In other words, enlightenment puts an end to these ordinary kinds of suffering. Now his question is, but what about certain kinds of suffering, like if you are in deep debt or you're going through divorce? How can these kinds of suffering subside due to enlightenment? Is enlightenment powerful enough to put an end to all kinds of suffering, the most intense kinds of suffering? He goes on to say, what about people who have mental health issues, like OCD, bipolar, or someone with epilepsy? How can they be free from suffering in spite of their problems? The shift of understanding brought about by Advaita Vedanta, by enlightenment, not by the teachings, but by when those teachings go in and you undergo this transformation of how you understand yourself. That inner transformation indeed puts an end to any and all suffering. Let's give some examples, no matter how intense. First of all, in terms of physical pain, there are stories of Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who died extremely painful deaths, both due to cancer. And the disciples were at the side of these great saints as they died, and the disciples saw there was no suffering. Was there pain? Absolutely. Can you have pain without suffering? That's the trick. I can't call it trick. That's what Vedanta leads you to discover. Yes, you can have pain without suffering. How? Pain is a physical sensation. Pain is a physical sensation. It's born in your body. It arises in your mind. As that pain arises in your mind, it is revealed by you, by pure consciousness. And as the pure consciousness that reveals the presence of pain in your mind, you, as consciousness, are utterly unaffected by the pain that's in your mind. The metaphor you've heard me give before is the sun shines on a pile of filth. Is the sun tainted at all because it shines on a pile of filth? How is the sun affected by what it shines upon? Not at all. And that's a good metaphor. Consciousness is not affected when it reveals the presence of pain in your mind, when it reveals the problems associated with divorce, all of that is in your mind. Most suffering, let's be clear, suffering is mental, pain is physical, but everything, all the other problems are in our minds. Vedanta allows you to be so completely detached from what's happening in your mind that whatever is happening in your body and mind, you recognize they don't affect you at all. Not at all. So for someone suffering from mental illness, that would be the perspective. Your mind, if I had mental illness, I would say, oh, look how my mind is defective. Thank goodness I am pure consciousness, utterly separate from my defective mind. You get the idea of the detachment? So, this detachment, though, requires not just a conceptual understanding of Advaita Vedanta, but as I said before, a personal discovery that the consciousness, which is my essential nature, that very consciousness remains utterly unaffected by problems of my body and problems of my mind. With this personal discovery, all kinds of suffering come to an end, no matter how severe. Next question. I'm just checking the time up here. We're doing fine. Next question from Maurice. Maurice asks, consciousness belongs to every living being, but then what does life represent for Advaita Vedanta? So consciousness is a fundamental reality. Is life a fundamental reality? And some of you know in Western philosophy, I think 2 centuries ago, élan vital, this kind of the essence of life was thought briefly to be a fundamental reality. They thought élan vital, this life as a fundamental reality, they thought it was a fundamental reality until they understood biology sufficiently well. So everything that we call life can be accommodated through biology. In ancient India, they didn't understand biology. They had a concept of prana. You can just think of prana, prana meaning life force, and their idea of prana was like a pre-scientific version of what we now call biology. So here's the point. Biology is part of nature. Life is part of nature. Nature is part of the world. Part of the world, which is a creation. And as a created world, it's not a fundamental reality. The world is a manifestation, not a fundamental reality. Consciousness is a fundamental reality. Consciousness exists at a completely different level than the world, like clay exists at a completely different level than the pot. So clay, we can think in this metaphor, clay is a fundamental reality. Consciousness is a fundamental reality. Pot is not a fundamental reality. The world is not a fundamental reality. The world includes biology. The world includes prana. The world includes life. So life we would not put in the same category as consciousness because it's not a fundamental reality. Next question from Suresh. Suresh lives in Chennai, and he asks, in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says that worshipping him and meditating on him is the way to reach him, thus ensuring no rebirth, whereas worshipping other devatas will not result in avoiding rebirth. Does this mean that if one's ishta devata, one's chosen form of God, if you pray to Lord Shiva or Lord Kartikeya, son of Lord Shiva, that worship and meditation will not result in moksha and freedom from rebirth? Kindly enlighten me. Okay, two issues. First of all, Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, of course, says, pray to me, meditate on me, but he never says that prayer to other deities are useless. In fact, he does say, I forget the exact verse, he does say that all of your prayers to other deities, he said, ultimately, those prayers come to me. Now, be careful here. When Sri Krishna says if you pray to Lord Shiva, those prayers come to me, Sri Krishna says. But when he says they come to me, he's not referring to himself as an avatar of Lord Vishnu. He's referring to himself as the fundamental reality. This is a subtle point of the Bhagavad Gita that many people don't understand, and that is Sri Krishna refers to himself at different ways. Sometimes he refers to himself as Arjuna's friend or Arjuna's charioteer. Sometimes he refers to himself as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu, but often he refers to himself in a more fundamental way, not as an individual deity or an avatara, but as determined in the Bhagavata Puranam. He says, Sakshat Bhagavan, just pure God, pure essence. So Sri Krishna does not say that worshipping other deities is useless. But the other issue here is the statement, does this mean that the worship would not result in moksha and freedom from rebirth? Worship alone does not free you from rebirth. Worship is a spiritual practice. Bhakti is and one of the most important spiritual practices. But worship and worship alone, underline that alone, worship alone does not result in moksha. Worship as part of your sadhana, worship as part of your life of spiritual growth can lead you to moksha. But bhakti is not the sum total of sadhana, spiritual practice. It is one particular spiritual practice. It's meant to support you in your process of traveling that path of spiritual growth, a path of spiritual growth that culminates in enlightenment, in moksha, in freedom from rebirth. So just to be simple, actually in logical terms, they say bhakti is a necessary but insufficient means for moksha. A little bit of logic. Bhakti is necessary but insufficient. Means that without bhakti, you won't gain freedom from moksha. But bhakti is insufficient means if you only practice bhakti, you won't gain freedom from rebirth. So necessary but insufficient. This is what is taught by Advaita Vedanta. Other traditions interpret differently, but in the teachings from Adi Shankara and the whole tradition of Advaita Vedanta, bhakti is considered necessary but insufficient. Okay. Next. Oh, we're going quickly through these. Nice. This question comes from Sumant, who lives in California. And again, let me paraphrase. Or pick up some. As I study Vedanta, I'm not so interested in worldly activities, but my wife is really engaged in certain personal, like travel, apparently. when I travel with her, and I often appear boring or disinterested, which causes friction, which means Sumant doesn't share his wife's passion about travel. I think that's an accurate way of putting it. But Sumant says, if I try to engage with intensity and be a good partner, that is to really engage with his wife and get into all of the travel things, he says, I lose my Vedantic perspective in some cases, and I become immersed in all of this stuff. I become distracted by planning and pleasure, and I stop meditating. I fell ill. So my question is, how can I participate enthusiastically in my spouse's passions without becoming boring? Nicely said. And how can I maintain my Vedantic center so that I don't fall back into ignorance and mental chaos? The solution, this is well said. Sumant is struggling with this. I can remember when I was a young man dealing with similar kinds of struggles. The solution, though, is not what you might think. The solution, surprisingly, is karma yoga, but karma yoga properly understood. And I think Sumant understands this, at least he does understand this to some extent, and that is, if your spouse wants to participate in worldly activities, and you are not inclined to participate in those worldly activities, the teachings of karma yoga say that you should set aside your own personal agenda for the sake of following dharma. So to participate with your wife in travel or whatever is dharma, and Sumant is doing that. But Sumant says he's not good at doing it. Sumant, like me, I said in a prior class, I was a terrible karma yogi, and I think Sumant is struggling with some of the same issues. It's not easy to be with your spouse, to be engaged in activities with your spouse, even though you know that this isn't the highest goal of life, to participate fully and to participate from your heart. You can do so with the teachings of karma yoga. In other words, by setting aside, and I'll try to make this as clear as possible, one of the most powerful spiritual practices is to set aside your own personal agenda for the sake of a higher purpose, following dharma. When you set aside your own agenda, and Sumant's agenda here is spiritual practice, Advaita Vedanta. But when you set Vedanta aside for the sake of fulfilling your responsibilities as a husband, that is a powerful spiritual practice, because you can set aside your own agenda and discover that it's okay. That's Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is to discover that you're okay no matter what. Consciousness is not, as we just said, consciousness is not affected by anything. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. I struggled with this when I was young, and Sumant is struggling with this now. It's not easy, but you absolutely can do it. Focus on karma yoga. By the way, for Sumant, also for the earlier questioner about karma yoga, there's that one little video. If you haven't seen it, please watch. The Secret of Karma Yoga. If you haven't watched that video, that's one you'll find very helpful. It really will help you manage what is actually a very challenging practice. So I hope you can do that. We'll take one more question and then we'll conclude for today. This question is from Nagarajan, and the question is, I would like to know if the pursuit of knowledge itself becomes an impediment to gaining realization. And he goes on quite a bit. Is the pursuit of knowledge, is Advaita Vedanta correctly understood as a pursuit of knowledge, like in the pursuit of other kinds of knowledge? So somebody goes to college and university and studies and gains master's degree, gets a PhD, does postgrad work and all of this. The pursuit of knowledge is endless, and you can pursue Vedantic knowledge in the same way. There are scriptures and scriptures and scriptures, so many scriptures. He makes reference to one text called Vichara Sagara. The very meaning of is ocean of inquiry, an oceanic teaching. So that the fact that it's called Sagara shows that there's no end. If you want to learn Sanskrit, if you want to study scripture, study commentaries, study sub-commentaries, there is no end to it. And none of that will make you enlightened. Remember that the teachings of Vedanta are not the goal. The teachings of Vedanta are a means to the end. What is the goal? Is discovering your true self as Satchidananda Atma. That's inside. That discovery is not going to take place when your attention is focused on a scripture or on any teaching. Yeah, I said earlier in the satsang that these teachings are meant to guide you on a personal practice of self-inquiry. If you're studying scripture for the sake of learning what the scriptures say, that's not Vedanta at all. That's a scholarly pursuit. But if you're using the teachings of Vedanta to examine your own experience through a process of self-inquiry that eventually leads you to discover your true nature, that's what Vedanta is about. So let's be very clear. The teachings of Vedanta are indeed Sagara, an ocean of knowledge, an ocean of scriptures, an ocean of Vedantic wisdom. But immersing yourself in that ocean of wisdom is outside of you. If your focus is outside on that ocean of wisdom, your focus is in the wrong direction. If your focus is inside, to use the teachings of Vedanta to guide your personal process of self-inquiry. We call it Atma Vichara. Now, to assist you in that process of self-inquiry, we have lots of teachings. And which teachings are necessary depends on you. For some people, a little bit of teaching is enough. For others, more teaching is necessary. You're the only one who can discover that. The point is that it's less about the teachings, more about your attitude towards the teachings. Are you interested in studying Vedanta? And, I'll end with this comment. I made this comment several times. The term to study Vedanta is a misnomer. We say that all the time, is that we're engaged in Vedantic studies. And the reason it's a misnomer is the subject matter is not Vedanta. Think about it. If you study history, the subject matter is history. If you study economics, the subject matter is not economics. If you study Vedanta, study in quotation marks, if you study Vedanta, the subject matter is Satchidananda Atma, which is identical to Brahman. So the subject matter, really speaking, is not Vedanta. The subject matter, ultimately, is your true self, Atma. I hope that answers the question. This will be a good place to conclude today. We'll end with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.